next for y'all, we have Ben Goodman talking about platforms. So in the subject, you say a good platform is an opinionated platform. I can't wait for you to tell us why.
Hi everyone, good mid-morning. My name is Ben. I'm a site reliability engineer at a company called Rocked. If you've ever purchased a ticket at Ticketmaster and then gotten a lovely ad offering you a free week of Hulu afterwards, or Apple TV Plus, that's the ad network that we power. A bit about me, I also like open source software. I maintain an open source tool. And in a prior life, I worked as a data scientist. So today we're going to be talking about why a successful platform is often one that is opinionated. So we're going to start with like a first principle of, why do we actually build developer tools and platforms in the first place? We're going to actually talk a bit about big box retail and what we can learn from them about the paradox of choice. And then we're going to, apply that to platforms in particular and talk about how when we have more configuration, oftentimes you get an inefficient platform, and more configuration is often less. And we're going to talk about some ways that we can actually, we've identified the problem, how do we actually bring some tangible solutions to the platforms we're developing. So Red Hat has this great quote, I think summarizing really well what a developer platform is for. The overarching goal is to identify the pain points impacting development teams and mitigate them by providing common, reusable tools and capabilities via an internal developer platform. And a key thing to keep in mind as we're building our platform is that we're building a product and our customers are other internal engineers that we work with, right? Okay, so we got that first principle out of the way. Now let's talk about two retailers. Maybe talking about Trader Joe's and Costco wasn't on your bingo card for talks this conference, but we're going to do it. So Costco, it's a discounting warehouse club, and Trader Joe's is a grocery store, tends to be in cities, tends to have relatively small footprints. One key thing in the business model of these companies that they have in common is they have very low SKU counts, meaning they sell a very limited number of items within each store. You're not going to find as much selection in a Costco or a Trader Joe's as you would in, say, a Walmart Supercenter or a Target. In fact, in a Walmart Supercenter, you can find up to 25 times as many items per store. Okay, so it's an interesting contrast there in retail models. Similarly, when we look at more tech-related hardware, we can think of comparing something like Apple, which if you go to apple.com, you basically see a very limited number of phone models each year. You can see, your iPhone SE, your base iPhone, Pro, Pro Max. It's very easy as a customer to go in there and pick the model that you think is appropriate for you. Let's contrast that with something like Samsung. Nothing against the technology with Samsung, but when you go to Samsung.com, you see a list immediately of 24 different phones. You have Galaxy A15, A53, A54, Galaxy Z Fold, Galaxy Z Flip. So it's a much more, there's a lot more choice in that user experience of which phone is the right phone for me, right, versus Apple. And similarly, if we think about contrasting the experience of something simple like buying a can of tomato sauce from, say, Walmart, we go to get tomato sauce and we have a whole aisle of tomato sauce options, right? When we go to Trader Joe's or Costco's, we basically have, 1 to 3. I think at Trader Joe's you can choose between regular tomato sauce and tomato sauce with garlic. So it's a much easier customer experience when you go in. You go in, you know what your two options are, it's much easier to make a choice. And customers respond pretty interestingly to these differences in choices within these retail environments. So Walmart is a very well-run company. Their sales per square foot in their stores is, from what I could find, around $600 to $700. Costco is significantly higher than that. Trader Joe's is even higher. And Apple, obviously, it's a little different selling tomato sauce versus iPhones, but they're the most efficient retailer out there. So what we can kind of learn from this is the best experiences, they provide glide paths, not opportunities for more decisions. So people actually really like knowing that there's one or two really good options for them to pick and making an easy choice versus having to optimize and choose the right configuration that's very complicated for their situation. Okay, so that's the retail side of things. Now let's talk about the actual engineering piece of this talk. So we're going to start with an example of a platform that started out with really good intentions, but maybe wasn't very efficient. So we wanted to start out providing a way for people to self-serve their infrastructure, things like compute, storage, and other resources, say from Google Cloud. This could be any cloud provider. We also want to make sure that any resources configured through this platform, are following best practices for security and cost. And so, we opted for a very flexible solution. Let's essentially give developers access to a centralized compute platform with Kubernetes. We'll give them some light tooling to make it easy to, say, manage namespaces on the cluster. They won't have to worry about cluster health, but beyond that, they can deploy their applications and configure the services within Kubernetes to their heart's content. And then, say for something like databases, other networking, we provide them common glide paths for deploying resources using Terraform. So this is great. We get a lot of flexibility for our developers, but with this flexibility comes a lot of burden on them. So now, they have to write several YAML files to deploy a new application, even though we provided this great K8s platform for them. And now, although it's easy to deploy things with Terraform, now they have to learn how Terraform works. They have to make sure they're configuring their resources correctly. And every time they need a new database, they need to write the Terraform for that. So there are a lot of downsides to this extreme flexibility, especially from our customers' perspective, who are the application developers, right? They've written their application. They really just want to deploy it and maybe connect it to a database. But now what they're doing is they're spending a lot of time writing configuration and repeating infrastructure definitions. Deployments are pretty slow and painful because of this. This isn't their core expertise. They're focused on writing a Go app, writing a JavaScript app. They're not focused on Helm chart, custom Helm charts, and Terraform code. And then as a result of this workflow that we've introduced where we want to make sure we have security and cost checks in place, but our developers have pretty much full range in configuration, we need to have a lot of reactive checks in place. So something in their CI/CD pipeline is hitting their configurations when they attempt to deploy and say, hey, you can't actually do this, you violated XYZ policy. That makes an already slow and frustrating experience for our customers even more slow and frustrating because they're getting kind of told reactively that they're not meeting the expectations of the organization for the deployment. And the interesting thing that happens, and I'm sure some of us have seen this in our own organizations, is when we offer such flexibility, the developers end up kind of creating their own more opinionated internal platform, and that they copy and paste whoever deployed first on the platform. So team A, got their application up and running on our new fancy Kubernetes cluster. Team B just says, okay, great, I'm going to use this platform, and I'm specifically going to exactly use what team A did. So, we almost get like the worst of both worlds here. We get common patterns that are widely distributed now, but they're not centrally managed. So you can have bugs propagate throughout the organization. You have very little visibility into, Are you following the Team A configuration deployment or Team C's version of using this platform? So, if you need to roll out upgrades to your organization, it becomes very impractical to do this at scale in such a scenario. And we end up with an opinionated but not well managed platform, essentially. So what does the opposite look like? What does it look like when we introduce a very regimented, opinionated platform from the beginning, where our developer customers don't actually need to make a lot of intricate decisions about infrastructure configuration? Maybe a developer comes to us and says, hey, I want to deploy this new app. And then you can say, okay, basically give us your environment variables, which of those are secrets, and how much compute you need. The rest is abstracted from you. Or maybe they say, I need a database. Okay, specify your capacity needs and tell us if it's MySQL or PostgreSQL. That's a much better glide path for the developer to get up and running. And in such a scenario, we can manage behind the scenes all the security and cost optimizations needed to make it compelling for our organization. So our developers, they have much less overhead burden. We get things built in that we want to build in. And on top of that, say we have Terraform modules that we recommend people using for their Postgres database deployments. We have a new security patch. We can say, hey, upgrade your module to version 1.3.0 that we've just released. It's a much easier state to manage your security posture in versus, hey, anyone deploying databases using Terraform, please check to make sure XYZ lines are written in this way, right? Okay, so kind of talked about the high-level recommendation. Let's make our platform very opinionated. Let's avoid this bad state where we're just copying and pasting very complex configurations across teams. And so let's talk about specific things we can do. So for bringing stronger opinions to K8s, one recommendation is to provide very opinionated Helm templates that allow teams to roll out their own services kind of based on their specific needs. And actually, when you step back and think at an abstract level, what are the high-level categories of applications that we need to support? Many times they can be grouped into, is it internet-facing? Is it internal access only to internal other applications? Or is it fully isolated within our VPC? And when a developer says, hey, I know I need this to speak to the internet, I can use this Helm template, specify my container, how much compute I need, and I'm good to go. It's a much better experience than them having to think about, oh, I need to make sure I include a service entry YAML Helm template for this application. They probably don't know what that is. It's very frustrating, and it slows the release time down pretty significantly. Another common tool is Terraform. Let's think about how we can provide more opinionation that way. So a great resource there is the Terraform module. Terraform module is basically a pre-packaged bundling of resources. You can think of it like for application code, we have a function. For Terraform resources, we can have a module. And so you can imagine, instead of someone needing to manually specify for an RDS deployment, the database, all the subnets the database is going to be using, security groups, et cetera, you can bundle that up into a single module that your developers can then consume and provision resources with, and upgrade the version of as needed. And I think one recommendation here is that if you can parameterize things to be as close to plain English as possible, that provides a much better developer experience. So if you have something configured as, say, high availability, true or false, that's much better than saying, do you need something multi-region? Do you need, fault tolerance, et cetera? . Okay, so in summation, if we bake in opinionated best practices, we're going to have a more successful platform that our end customers, the developers, are going to be happier with. The paradox of a choice affects developers just as much as it does us when we're picking out our tomato sauce. We want to make sure that we have built-in best practices for everything in our environment. And I think this came up earlier, but Gall's law, this is pretty similar to this. Oftentimes it's easy to start with a platform that's relatively simple. Then we get asked repeatedly, oh, can you tweak this? Can you tweak that? And before you know it, we have something that's very complex to manage with a bunch of different configuration. Really resist the urge to do that and speak with your developers about why that's necessary. Maybe it actually fits into a different use case, et cetera. So thanks to Rock for sending me here and getting to speak to you today. I guess if you're interested in working with us, we are hiring. So feel free to check out our jobs. We're hiring across data engineers, platform engineers, et cetera. And yeah, thank you for your time and participation today.